Jerry Tabatt with you with another edition of our military community. You got a great guest with me today, and we're both kind of long-winded, so I'll have to kind of watch him just a little bit on this. But joining me this morning is Commander Michael Mosi, who is the commanding officer of Naval Support Activity over at Panama City Beach. Commander Mosi, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so very much for having me over, Jerry.
Before we get into what we're going to talk about, everything that's going on out there on the beach with the Navy and the Coast Guard, tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to get your military background. We want to get to know you a little better.
All right.
And why do you always have that smile on your face?
I get that question quite often, actually. So let's start as far back as who I am with regard to my heritage. So I happen to be a first-generation American. My parents are from Ghana, West Africa. My dad worked for the UN, and so if you hear about military brats, children that grew up in military families, I'm what you call a UN brat. So the whole nomadic lifestyle is very familiar to me. I've moved several schools, several locations growing up. When I turned 18, I got a little smart in the mouth, challenged my dad. And my dad, at the time we were living in Ghana, I just graduated out of high school, and he's like, well, if you're grown enough to ask me these questions, I think it's time for you to see your way out. And so I was given a one-way ticket back home to the States. Came to Virginia, which is where I landed, and was with a family that my parents had known. Within about 5 or 6 months of living there, I knew right off the bat that I wanted to do something more than just exist. Sure. And so college was what I had intended on doing. I was working at Sports Authority, and a Marine recruiter came in. I was selling golf clubs at the time. He was totally impressed with the way I talked to him about the golf clubs, and it's like, what are you doing with yourself? So I told him, you know, I'm currently going through a community college and looking to pay my way through college. And he's like, well, there's a better way of doing that. How about you join the military? Wow. And we have an opportunity that you just can't pass up. So went home, thought about it, and decided I was going to set up an appointment with him. So I went to their recruiting station, and this was back in 1992. So they had these recruiting stations that had all the branches in there. I went up to the Marine Corps, who was the guy that actually talked to me, and after I was done with his presentation, I decided to stop through all the other branches. In Ghana and in most West African countries, you grew up being what your parents are. My dad was a 2-time PhD. He did medicine, and then he went back to do nutrition. My mom was a nurse. So the medical field was sort of where my head was geared, and I decided that the Navy would be the best place for me because they offered an enlisted program, the Hospital Corpsman program. So that's who I joined, was the Navy. But I did not join as a corpsman. I was interested in getting started with the journey, and I wanted to become an officer as soon as I possibly can, which meant I had to get my degree. Sure. So I joined as an Ocean Systems Tech Analyst. That's a mouthful, I know. It's essentially tracking submarines from shore commands. And so what we did was we monitored SOSUS stations. So that's how I started my journey as an E1. And shortly after I got fully qualified, I applied for the ROTC scholarship. Was fortunate enough to get picked up for that, and started my journey to become an officer. Wow. Went through Rhode Island, where we had, I was actually a second class of Boost, which is broadened opportunity for officer selection and training, which gives most enlisted individuals an opportunity to prepare themselves Sure. for the college journey. Once we were done with that, I got the ROTC scholarship and went to University of Florida. So a Gator, and I know I'm in FSU land right now, but I still stand tall. Graduated from there, and then went on to flight school. So became an aviator in the United States Navy. So I'm a naval flight officer, wow. The backseater. I like to quip with the pilots. I'm the brains of the operation. And since then, I've done both coasts, so East Coast, West Coast, and majority of my tours overseas, with the exception of my time in Millington when I was a detailer, and then branched on into what I'm doing now, that is running the bases.
Wow, and you've had a lot of different experiences and everything, and it shows in your personality and how you get along with people and everything. But Before we get into some of the missions out there,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about. It's almost 6 years now, it'll be 5.5 years since Hurricane Michael came through here.
That's correct.
It did a lot of damage out at the Navy base too. So what about the building and expansion that's going on there now? Is this process on schedule, and when do you think it's all going to get done? I know there's, just like Tyndall, there's all kinds of activities going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So with regard to recovery from Hurricane Michael, we have maybe 3 or 4 projects that remain to be completed. The installation over here at NSA Panama City didn't get hit as hard as Tyndall did.
Right.
So our renovation efforts are tracking along with near completion. There are things that are unforeseen that come up, weather delays and
Sure.
all those things.
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day basis, myself and Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, so NAVFAC, they're the entity that manages all the projects and facilities on installations, both Navy and Marine Corps. And so the PWO, Public Works Officer, that's on the installation, and I have almost a daily routine where we sit down and talk about,
Sure.
are there any roadblocks or how are we doing? Currently, we're adjusting to a majority of the issues that have happened, and I think that we're streamlined to be complete here shortly. In addition to that, we have some new projects that are being developed, and those projects are to enhance the mission with regard to some of the
Sure.
tenant commands that we have on the installation, and just modernizing the systems and equipment that they use in the facility. So taking the opportunity to
Sure.
move
Now,
forward.
there used to be a lot of housing out there too, sir, and a lot of that's disappeared. Is that going to come back, or?
Right now, we have a steady footprint of about 49 units that we're managing, and with the size of the installation and with our proximity to housing in the community, I think that's going to be a steady state. The entity, Balfour Beatty, that actually manages our housing right now, have been pretty steady state with regard to how they're being able to maintain and monitor the properties that we have right now due to all these hurricanes.
Sure.
And so there's not enough capital, I guess, to invest more. But at the current rate, we're steady state and we're doing very fine.
I guess probably if there is a good side to having that storm out there, sir, is everything is now being built up to 2024 standards. So
That's
you're good in
correct.
that. You're good in that aspect. Wind loads and all of that too.
Absolutely.
There's all kinds of things that we hear about the naval facility out there. We hear about the dive school. We hear about the Surface Warfare Center.
That's correct.
You got the Coast Guard out there. Let's
Absolutely.
kind of break this down. First of all, what in the world is the Surface Warfare Center?
All right. So the Warfare Center, there are actually several of them that serve the United States Navy. There are about 10 branches of them. We happen to host one of them, which deals specifically in coastal warfare systems. And now we're delving a little bit more into special warfare systems as well. So if you imagine any of the systems with regard to the coastal systems or coastal warfare, right? Transitioning from shore to blue water and then back from blue water to shore. That's the focus of this entity. They do research, development, and testing of equipment. And then not only that, they field the equipment as well, and they sustain the equipment once it's fielded out into the United States Navy. So as a nutshell, as a brief description of what that Warfare Center does, that's the best way to describe it. They're comprised of about 1,600 civilians that are GS employees, and then about 1,200 contractors. So almost 3,000 plus personnel. About 60% of the population of there are PhDs, and so we have we have a very intelligent cadre of individuals that are over there dealing in the research and development out there on the installation. So, yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that we always think about Tyndall and the aircraft and how big Tyndall is. Mm-hmm. There's actually a lot of people out there that are on that naval support
Absolutely.
activity
Our
out there.
total population is about 4,000 steady state, and on a yearly basis, we have about 1,200 students that come through to get trained for diving as well. So I'll mention some of the tenant commands that we have
Sure.
on the
Go for
installation.
it.
So there are 4 major tenants that we have on the installation and 13 others that support the 4 major missions. The first being Naval Surface Warfare Center, which we just mentioned.
Right.
They're the largest by a long shot, and then we are followed closely by the dive school. So they're the dive salvage training center as well.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
All right, so that happens to be the Navy's core of diving training, right? Not only the Navy, but then all DoD entities. So we've got Marine Corps that come through, Coast Guard that comes through, Air Force that comes through as well. So we have all the branches and some civilian agencies as well that come to do their base diving instruction, right? So they get taught how to dive. Their focus is on salvage and mission sets, right? So it is a unique entity. It's the largest dive facility that the military has worldwide. And its location here in Panama City is wonderful because we've got the op areas that are right off St. Andrews Bay and then on into the Gulf test range. So it provides them with topography and an area that mimics quite a bit of the world's geographic areas as well. So they're able to train quite extensively to be able to support the missions no matter where in the world that they go.
And before we move on to another tenant unit there,
Yeah.
do you have Navy SEALs that come through there too?
We do. We have all entities. So every branch and every entity that has a diving component to it comes through this school over here. Yes.
Yeah.
It's unique. Yes. The next one we'll talk about is Navy Expeditionary Dive Unit, and they deal in the experimenting and testing and development of criteria, so left and right parameters of how to use the dive equipment. What's unique about Panama City is the fact that Navy Surface Warfare Center also develops and tests dive equipment, right? And so they test the equipment, and then they push that on to Navy Expeditionary Dive Unit that goes on to do extensive testing on it to make sure that it actually works with us as the humans. So they do the physiological tests and all that on the equipment, and then they write the technical directives that come with that. And then from there, once they're fielded and utilized right there at the dive school before they're fielded out into the fleet as well. So those 3 entities work perfectly together and all located right here, hubbed right out of NSA Panama City. The last that I'll mention is the Center for Explosive Disposal and Dive. And they happen to be the ISIC, so they're the higher echelon to the entirety of the dive community as well. So we're fortunate to have that next echelon right here on the installation that deals with and monitors the entire track. So they deal with, hey, how do we develop these divers? Where do they go next? How are we utilizing them in the fleet and managing that entire process? So those are the big 4 that I mention most of the time. And with those 4, they comprise of majority of the population on the installation. The remainder of the units that are on there are support units. So we've got, which majority of fall underneath me or underneath my purview, right? So what I do as a commanding officer for the installation is I'm responsible for the fence line. Anything inside of the fence line of that installation is my responsibility. Consider me a landlord, right? That's the best way I can put it.
You don't get to charge rent, though.
I'm the landlord of that installation, and I have tenants, and the tenants are some of the entities that I just mentioned, right? So with regard to security, anything with regard to security for the installation falls under my purview. Anything dealing with the facilities on the installation. So some buildings, some of my tenants, if they have a broken AC, HVAC system, or whatever the case may be, I liaise with the Naval Systems Engineering Command to fix those things. So the facilities fall underneath my purview. Emergency preparedness and disaster recovery, right? So if there's anything dealing with, we just talked about Michael that happened. In events of those, I become the supported commander from all the tenants. They take care of whatever it is that I need to make sure that we can manage the disaster first and foremost, and then recover from the disaster to get after the mission as quickly as we possibly can. I do some other stuff as well, which is critical for our warfighters, and that is the entertainment piece of it. So we've got a morale, welfare, and recreation center, and they take care. I mean, they do phenomenal over here. We've got a pool, we've got some dining facilities, we've got a main deck that's a dining facility right on the water, provides a little bit of recreation for them. We deal with intramural sports. We have pickleball courts. We've got a basketball. We've got a gym facility that's state of the art. We've got a swimming pool that's also very robust that supports the installation, and indeed also our retirees as well. So it's a full-blown operation. You know, we've got a bank on board. We've got that's Navy Federal Credit Union. We've got the Navy Exchange that sort of provides groceries and immediate needs, especially for the transient students that come through over there. We've got an EOD unit on board, so anything dealing with explosives that are either found out in the community, or say we were to have an explosive that was on the installation for some reason or another, right? They would come and respond to it. They've got all the equipment. They respond not only here on the installation, but the entirety of the Panhandle. So they've got quite a bit of footprint. We've got the Coast Guard that's actually non-Navy.
Yes. Yeah, how does that tie together? Because people say, oh, the Navy and the Coast Guard.
Yes.
They're both on the water.
So it's actually a beautiful symbiotic relationship that we have with them. So they maintain a footprint on the installation. They're their own entity. I consider them a tenant. They're non-Navy though. And the mutual agreement we have with them is not only do they have the footprint over there, but then we've got a coastline, from the installation to St. Andrews Bay. So they, when they go out and do their missions, also support us by patrolling the coastline as well. In the event we have any boaters, because this is a big tourist area, so people are renting pontoon boats and have their own private crafts. If they were to encroach inside of the perimeter of the installation, they would respond as well for those events. So it's a beautiful relationship that we have with them.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that go on there. Instead of being on the hard base, you have the dive boats. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to tour those dive boats. They're amazing. Tell us about that.
Oh, it's unique. They've got two large vessels that they have over there, and for the different phases of training. So the way that their dive training starts is they do it. They start off at the pool for the basics, preliminary, getting used to your equipment. Then they get out to the pier side where they're in shallow water right there by the installation. Then they utilize these dive boats, which are, fully equipped and maintained perfectly, right? To take the students out, open into the bay and into the op areas where they do a little bit more of their complex dives from there. So beautiful asset that we have here at the installation.
Now, you mentioned before, sir, about the recreation, the fishing and things like that.
Yes.
These boats are out in that Gulf too. I mean, you guys are doing your practice and your diving and your training and all that. How can we identify you're out there, and how far away do we need to stay from you when you're out there with your activities? So
the op areas in which they operate are actually maintained by us and my entity, so the Naval Support entity itself. And so we have what we call op areas. Those op areas are cleared. So you have to request permission to either transit through there and et cetera. So that's the major means, is that we have a deconfliction. These are restricted areas. Civilians are not allowed to go through those areas, especially when there are operations going in there. In addition to that, the operators have different means of indicating that they're doing dive ops over there. So one of the most popular things is the dive flag. So you'll see the red, white, and red flag that's out there. And they communicate as well. They've got additional vessels that go out there with them to help monitor and make sure that no one encroaches upon them as well.
Yeah. What's the deal with the hovercraft? They're not... You see them once in a while, but 10 years ago they were out there. You had 3 or 4 of them. Now it's kind of back a little bit. Are you still operating them?
Yes, we are. Matter of fact, we're currently going through, or Naval NSWC, so Naval Surface Warfare Center. They're in charge of the hovercraft. Essentially, we're going through a replacement, right, of the older versions of the hovercraft right now. And what they do is, initially, as you mentioned, that was the fielding, the initial fielding of them. That's why there were so many of them. They're out and operating now, and If you've seen them come in sporadically, it's because we maintain or sustain them throughout the life cycle while they're in the fleet being utilized. Now that they're going through a mod, we're going through the whole process of replacing them again. I think they're at the 9th iteration now, and so you'll see them come in, get retrofitted over here with the latest and greatest equipment, get them out there, test them, and then field them out into the fleet again.
Now, you know, you work very closely with the Coast Guard and that. We used to have Coast Guard cutters here
Yes.
that went out patrolling and they've done some big drug busts and things like that in the Gulf. Is there still some of that activity goes on?
Absolutely. Their mission still remains their mission. That's their primary focus while they're here. So even though they're a tenant on the installation, they perform all the Coast Guard missions. So they're out there doing the interdictions. They have a very large footprint that they actually patrol and monitor, and they've got their vessels that they utilize for that. In addition to the interdiction and making sure that there's coastal protection, all the marine, so buoys and markers and et cetera, they also are responsible for maintaining those. And so they stay very gainfully employed while they're out there. Yes.
Now, one thing with you being out there on the beach, the naval support activity that's going on out there and Tyndall, one question I've had from people is, how do you guys work together? Because like Tyndall's got the drone program and things like that. You guys work together, don't you?
Absolutely. So with regard to mission sets, there's sometimes that there's a little bit of an overlap, but the major part of the interrelationship that we have deals with the common thing that we all have, and that is sailors and airmen. And how do we sustain, how do we take care of these sailors and airmen? How do we provide for them with regard to housing, with regard to medical care, with regard to the schools they have? And that is a joint effort that we have together. So the leadership over at Tyndall has been very gracious. Matter of fact, in the entirety of my career, this is the best I've seen a relationship between not only two installations, but two different services. We truly operate as a military, not necessarily just an Air Force or a Navy. And so it's been wonderful.
It is kind of unique because Tyndall being on the water and you guys associated with the water on the water too, you know, that's, you don't see that a lot with the Navy and the Air Force together with that.
Yeah, the unique thing that brings us together is the op area. So we utilize the surface and the subsurface portions of the op areas, and they, of course, with their mission set, use the air portion of that. So Eglin Air Force Base is actually in charge of scheduling and monitoring the restricted areas with regard to airspace. Tyndall uses that and is in close coordination with them. We, the Navy, dealing with the surface portion, subsurface portion, also have to coordinate with them. That way we can deconflict with regard to where we're using.
And that brings me to my next question. You've already gotten into that. With Tyndall here, our naval support activity, you've got Eglin over there, big training base, and then you got Pensacola.
Absolutely.
Mobile in that area. How do you guys coordinate all of this together? Because it's not just like, well, I'm here, you're in Alabama, you're in West Florida, I don't worry about you.
Yeah. So the beautiful thing, and actually things are changing now quite rapidly. Tyndall Air Force Base used to be a training air base, and they've just recently transitioned to being an operational air base. Pensacola is a training air base as well, and so the mission sets with regard to training aviators and et cetera is a like mission set. And so a lot of coordination is done with regard to the airspace, of course. But it's a beautiful symbiotic relationship we have.
And this overlap between the different branches of service, a lot of people don't realize that one of you can't operate by yourself. Like I was Air Force career, I know that I have to have the support of the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard. So it all works together as one big family unit. And
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, with all this new expansion and everything that's going on, what would you estimate is the economic impact now going to be in Bay County here? It's really impacting the beach a lot.
At our current footprint, just naval support activity with regard to our labor costs, or our employees that are here, I mentioned about 3,000 strong that are actually locals. Majority of them are locals, right? Between us living on the economy, between us having these projects and having contractors that we hire onto the installation, our current economic impact is about $500 million.
Wow.
$500 million, right? And that's just naval support activity, Panama City. Tyndall has a magnitude that's larger
Sure.
because they have a bigger population, and that's going to get even bigger because they have about 3 squadrons that are coming on board here in the near future. So.
And that's the thing with these bases that we have now that are expanding Air Force wide. I know the Navy is going to continue to expand. Can you give us any heads up? Are we going to see more expansion out there at naval support activity?
I'd say fortunately and unfortunately, right? So fortunately for us, there's one property that's to the south of the installation. It's called Barefoot Palms, and that's a property that was gifted from the state to the Navy. And so we're in the process of acquiring that property. There was a little bit of paperwork that needed to be done, and it was a little extensive, but we're getting through it. So I'm anticipating that hopefully by the end of this year, we will have that property. That will constitute an expansion with regard to footprint for the installation. But with regard to expansion for mission sets, at the moment, we're confined on the east side by St. Andrews Bay. We've got Thomas Drive on the west side and 98 on the north of us, right? So what we're planning on doing, and we're doing currently, is we'd be demolishing some of the old buildings that are either in a condemned status or not being able to be used, and then repurposing that land for newer facilities. So there is still expansion that's happening. It's just not a footprint increase. Yeah.
Before we have to start wrapping this up, and everything, I got a question for you.
Absolutely.
You had no idea I was going to ask you this. How did you get the nickname Kong?
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
You.
Absolutely not. And unfortunately for you and the audience, I acquired it the hard way, and it's it's a way that I can't quite share on here.
Okay. See what I mean? But, see what I mean about that smile? It's always there.
No, I think it's very fitting, and I earned it.
All right.
So
now,
good to go.
How can people tour the facility out there? Because that's important to educate this community too.
It's actually one of my major focuses, right? So there's this notion that, we are pretty intimidating. If you see us in uniform out there with that stern look on our face and, prim and proper out, but we're human beings.
Exactly, yeah.
We wear our pants the same way. We use the community the same way as everyone. And it's critical to me that everyone that has an opportunity to visit us, come and visit us. Right. I have a public affairs office. Colin Merritt is his name right now, and that information is totally available. We'll be able to provide that for you. But if we reach out to my public affairs office, we will set up a tour and have you come through and take a look at some of the facilities that we have on the installation. It'll be my honor and my joy to share that base.
It's education, and that's what's important.
It is.
We got roughly 2 minutes to go. What are your final thoughts?
Bay County has been phenomenal. The relationship that exists between the military and the community has been nothing like I've ever experienced. I joined the Navy back in 1992, so this is about the 32nd year, I believe, that I've been in and around the world, and I think that this place shares such a warm welcome for us and a willing notion to help out the military. With that, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the community. I want to say thank you to you for helping with programs like this to educate the general about what's going on. So, yeah.
Well, and that's what it's all about. And again, and you alluded to this, don't be afraid. If you see a person in military uniform out there, don't be afraid of them. Go up and talk to them. They're normal human beings too. Commander Michael Mosi, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you coming in today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. Same to you now.
Mm-hmm.
And that, unfortunately, we're about out of time again on this edition of our military community. Great talk today with Commander Mosi over there from the Naval Support Activity. Go and set up a tour with them. Just call the public affairs office there at the Naval Support Facility, and they'll take care of you. And learn how this all ties together with not only the Navy working, but also with the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and all of that working together. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this edition of our military community. We'll see you again next week with a new edition. In the meantime, have a great day, everyone.